So we started the show, we talked about the reform poll last night, but then we got the breaking news that the anti-corruption minister, yes, hear me correctly, my friends, on Drive at 5:05, the anti-corruption minister, Tulip Siddiq, has resigned this afternoon after days of being pressured by the press because it transpires that her aunt was the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, who was forced out because of allegation considerations. And Tulip Siddiq, we discovered this morning, is under investigation for corruption of resources in Bangladesh. You couldn't bloody make it up, could you?
Yes, so this is the allegation that that particular regime in Bangladesh has had it away with £4 billion.
Had it away, yeah.
And that has been filtered to kind of, you know, friends and family of that regime, which is now deposed. And somehow it appears that Tulip Siddiq, and I'm sure she's completely innocent of this, all complete coincidence, has ended up living in a succession of properties.
£2 million properties in London,
given or loaned to her. We have to, though, don't we, in the wake of Louise Haigh, who obviously had to resign because it turns out she's a convicted
Was that the pink-haired
the transport minister?
She conned an insurance company.
So that was only 3 or 4 weeks ago. So do we not now have to have a discussion nationally about Keir Starmer's judgment? So he puts in place someone to oversee and investigate corruption, someone that he probably knew was kind of under a cloud.
They're great mates, by the way, neighbouring constituencies.
Lots of pictures of them together, politically, of course, not suggesting anything else for a second. But you would imagine that he would have realised that there was a kind of a hint, a whiff of something amiss with regard to her connections with the deposed Prime Minister of Bangladesh, the same as he obviously knew about Louise Haigh and her conviction for fraud. Who else? Who's next? We're going to find out that Yvette Cooper's done something?
Well, just to give you an idea of how completely incompetent and a humble mind Sir Keir Starmer is, and I hate even calling him Sir, because then I have to think of Sadiq Khan, right? This is a man who wrote a letter, have you seen this letter? Accepting her resignation, said the door will always be open to you. So you've just had to get rid of a woman. Well, you haven't got rid, she's resigned because you haven't got the balls to do it, because she's being accused of corruption. You're saying the door is open to you. What does that tell the British people?
And insiders say as well that where she, a week ago, referred herself to the Parliamentary Standards Committee...
because she was told to.
It said, the Guido Fawkes website, for instance, said she was forced to. She said, no, I'm not going to. Because, of course, she knew that she got investigated, potentially, if she is guilty, that she would have been exposed. Well, clearly, I mean, look, there's more question of guilt now, I think, over Tulip Siddiq on the basis that she has resigned. I mean, if you were innocent, would you resign?
Not at all. So I'll put it out there. First question for you this hour, 0344 499 1000. What about Keir Starmer's judgment? 7 months. He screwed the pensioners. He's destroyed the farming community. He said to any small business, you know what, I'm not going to support you at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make your life a misery. I'm going to give my mates in the unions pay rises. This country is suffering financially. And 2 of his picks in 22 weeks, three of his picks...
Can I reintroduce the letters? Sorry, so he also knows, he knew, presumably, that Rachel Reeves, I can't believe I'm actually on talkTV, holding
from accounts.
Holding a letters. That he knew that she had faked her CV. I mean, not only did she do that, but she's admitted she did it. Keir Starmer would have known that she did it. So that's not 1, not 2, but 3. And we're only 6 months into this government. What's going to happen in 3 years' time, Jeremy? Is there going to be any of the front bench left?
Absolutely not. Not in a million. 0344 499 1000. Last night, YouGov poll, the Rolls-Royce of polls, sending out this message, which is good news for you and I, that Reform UK, their support sitting just 1% behind the sitting government, the Labour government. Now, for me, there's a serious question to ask people that are listening and watching this afternoon. Does this finally mean a reset in British politics? We've talked about the two-party system for years. We've had the Liberal Democrats bleating on for 25, 30 years about how proportional representation should be the case because then you'd get a fair selection of people to justify who was voting in which ways. But no, because in the old days, north of Watford Gap, they all voted Labour and south they voted for the Tories. And so that was the way it was. I think this is a seminal moment for reform. I think this sends a really, really strong message, and I believe they'll win a majority, although you might disagree, but I think Nigel Farage and Richard Tice are really seriously onto something.
I think it is pivotal. Let's not forget that this is a party that is only 4 years old. They're not only sitting only 1% below the Labour Party, the party of government, only 6 months in their honeymoon period, but they're, of course, above and over and above in terms of polling success over and above the Conservatives. So that is I mean, we should really just take a second to think about that, right? So you've got the Conservative Party, the oldest party on the planet that should therefore be credible, robust and so on, has been overtaken by really a kind of a small start-up of a party, only 4 years old. I think it is seminal. I think it is pivotal. I actually think what will happen, and of course now the chatter over the next 2 or 3 years, Jeremy, is going to be, well, if the right is divided, let's say it's 25-25, in terms of 25% for the Conservatives, 25% for Reform.
Who leads? Because together they'll destroy Labour.
But they will let Labour in through the back door, and then, I think as Julie was talking about on a show this morning that I tuned into, another 5 years of Keir Starmer after 2029.
I don't think that can happen.
Well, no, I think what has to happen, and I think what will happen, and this is up to now, the leadership of the Conservative Party, both at central office and Kemi Badenoch, if she lasts, I don't think she will, to the next election, and also Nigel Farage or whoever, to come together and do a deal. Now, I don't mean a merger. I don't mean that Reform becomes the Conservatives or the other way around. I think what happens is there will be a seat-by-seat conversation, and there will be some seats that Reform fight and some seats that the Conservatives fight. In that way, you end up with a coalition in 2029 of the right, and then you end up with probably a Conservative Prime Minister, Nigel Farage as Home Secretary.
I'm going to disagree. I don't think either of them will do a deal with each other, and I think they will cut each other's throats. But a man who phoned up just before the news, and we want to hear from you, 0344 499 1000, said, and I quote, their vote's gone up 10% this year. In 3 years' time, you could be looking at Reform with a 40% share because they are doing nothing but growing. But for me, it's not a fad. It's not just, I don't look at it and go, oh, people are just hacked off. I think people want to hear and talk about immigration. I think they want to hear and talk about growth. I think they want to talk about crime and low taxation. I think that, and the other thing is, Russ, right? If you look, as we were saying with Harry, if you look at America and all of Europe and all of these... Everything's gone to the right, mate. We're like a beacon of misery in the middle of nowhere, aren't we?
I don't want to sound like a pompous political academic here, because I'm really not.
No, you're certainly not you're not an academic. I mean, you're
pompous, but not academic.
You old git.
2 GCSEs, I'll have you know.
How many?
Back in '84, 2. That was it.
Is that all you got?
That's all I got. Didn't go to uni. That's why I had to become an estate agent, Jeremy. That's what happens.
I've got a joke for you.
This is a lesson, by the way. If you fail your GCSEs, you end up having to become an estate agent.
Why don't estate agents look out the window in the morning? So they've got something interesting to do in the afternoon.
Yes.
Were you really an estate agent?
I was.
A mental flyweight.
Can we move on?
No.
Can we move on just a little bit?
I want to talk about that and the hair transplant, because the hair transplant is now looking Badger-esque because it's dark, the transplant, and the rest of it's white.
Yeah, but that's not a bad look.
Is it?
Well, it's like all gangsters and
like
kind of
skunk.
movie villains. They have their names. Russ the Badger. Have you seen the Badger today? Yeah, I think he's been in. Can I just make a point about the Conservatives and Reform? Have you noticed what's starting to happen? We will be talking about this, I'm sure, over the next few weeks and months. You've got Reform now being criticised for moving a little bit towards the centre, based on what Nigel Farage said recently
about Tommy Robinson.
Well, Tommy Robinson and also what's her name, Begum, and he is quoted as saying we should consider having him back. I'm not quite sure he did actually say that, but anyway,
he said we should have a conversation.
Yeah, and he's also said
absolutely fundamentally wrong.
I think it's wrong, but he also has questioned the wisdom of blatant deportation. So Farage all of a sudden moving to the centre because I think he's trying to make the Reform Party more professional, more electable. At the same time, and I don't want to jump the gun because I think you want to talk about this, we've got Kemi Badenoch today talking about subcultures and peasant backgrounds relating to people that commit child rape.
And this is a woman, by the way.
But she's gone to the right.
She's gone further than and Jenrick
so they're kind
even
of
began to go. Yes, they're swapping over, and the Tory party does. This is a really interesting thing because, and I think this is where Musk has his problem, right? Because Donald Trump, love him or loathe him, be it criminal investigations, women jumping up and down, people saying they're going to try and kill him, did not deter from what he believes. Now, maybe that'll be a disaster again. Maybe Trump 2.0 will be like...
changed his view.
No, he won't change his view. To get elected in this country, it seems, politicians have to make allowances. So you're right. Suddenly is Farage talking about, you know, oh, Tommy Robinson not so good, and quite rightly, and then, you know, I think we should be having a discussion about Shamina Begum. And Kemi Badenoch blames grooming abuse on people from peasant backgrounds.
And Robert Jenrick 2 weeks ago calling people that come here on small boats aliens. I mean, so you know that is the language.
I'll tell you what,
they're almost trying to out-reform.
Let's have a little bet with the 2 GCSE Badger from Essex. All right, the estate agent, Badger the estate agent from Essex. I reckon that Badenoch won't last.
I don't think she
I reckon that somebody like Cleverly or somebody straight down the middle. I don't. I hope
it's not Cleverly. I think it'll be Jenrick. I think Jenrick will get another bite of the cherry.
No, I don't think he will.
Because I think he talks a good game when it comes to being right-wing and not far-right, not a thug, centre-right. He talks a good game. I'm not quite sure. I'm not convinced he really is as right-wing as he portrays, but he does make the right noises. And I think Kemi is now trying to out-Jenrick and out-reform. But we're not buying it because, of course, Kemi Badenoch doesn't come out with any policies.
Somebody said to me yesterday, the thing about it is, bless her, it's all a bit quick and she needs to spend time working out where the Tories...
She knows what her values are, doesn't she?
Well, presumably she does. Listen, this is interesting. Two-tier Keir is so weak he'll never sack anyone. He would rather resign, says Margaret Starmer. Now, this is quite funny, Ryan. Even will laugh at this. Starmer has succeeded Meghan Markle as the most hated man in Britain. I thought she was... Oh, we can't say that, can we? I don't know. Rob's in London. By the way, have you heard this news? Have you heard this news? Pubs could ban customers... This is just going to wind the hell out of me.
No, don't. I read this morning, honestly, please.
Pubs could ban customers from speaking about contentious issues like transgender rights or religious views because that doesn't sit with Labour's workers' rights reform. So basically, if you and I go to the pub, we can't have a fag in the garden, a pint's £8, and if you say to me something that's offensive...
We start talking about immigration.
We could be thrown out and reported and you could be arrested for being a racist.
Yeah, so the epicentre, the bastion of a free speech environment is surely the good old British pub, right? So now, under Labour's crazy laws, and this speaks to the whole thing around, non-crime hate incidents and so on, and the the online act that's going to seek to try and stop us talking openly and candidly on social media and so on. You can't offend anybody. This is straight out the same playbook. The fact now that because it might offend a snowflake barman or barmaid, you won't be able to talk openly in the pub about what you truly believe as a matter of freedom of speech about crime, immigration or whatever. Talk about sanitising society. This is what we used to call fascism.
I know. Couldn't agree more. Let's go to the phone lines. North Yorkshire. Kev, you're on to Russ and you're on Talk Drive. What you got?
Thanks very much. Now, I was just wanting to respond to you to, the thought that there may have to be some sort of deal done with reform in the Conservative Party. I really don't think there will be, and the reason I don't think there will be is because by the time we get round to dealing with this issue in 3 or 4 years' time, the country will be in such a state, the Conservative Party will be nowhere to be found. The only option for people will be reform for any change, and I really think it's just a political whim for people who don't know where to go that think there needs to be a deal between the two, because there really doesn't.
I think it's a very interesting point that I do believe that moment last night, that poll was quite seminal, Kev. Both of us, Russ and I do, because we've been brought up to believe two-party. I think people are genuinely now saying, for all sorts of reasons, we've had this yo-yo situation where Labour does this, the Tories do that. I don't think that... It's really interesting, because I thought the Tories were in trouble for 10 years. Within 6 months, I think Labour will not get in again for another 10 years. When the stars align, and I think with Farage getting Nick Candy on board and getting a more professional machine, I think it's very interesting. I believe, Russ, I think, agrees with me, that finally we do have an alternative in this country.
Well, we do have an alternative. It used to be the Lib Dems, remember them? They now just go to theme parks and, it seems water ski and fall into water and make themselves look like clowns. That's basically the sum total of the political capital of the Liberal Democrats. So the Reform Party now, I think, is seen as a much more credible alternative than the Lib Dems, because I think actually the population is much more centre-right than it is Lib Dem. I think that's been proven in previous elections and, of course, in the Brexit referendum. But I think the change, based on what we were saying earlier on, the change that we've now seen is that we've seen what various Conservative governments look like, a kind of plethora of Conservative prime ministers. We've seen that hasn't worked. We've been let down. We've ended up disappointed. The Conservative government of the last 2 years, prior to Keir Starmer's, was not Conservative. Now, back to back, we've got the benefit of being able to see how disappointing and what liars, frankly, how disingenuous the Labour Party are. So what we have here is an absolute example staring us in the face of what I would call, what others are calling, the uni party. Conservative, Labour, it's the same thing. They lie, they cheat, they deceive, and that's why reform are coming up. But I do think it's for reform to lose, Jeremy. I think they've got to be very careful over the next 2 or 3 years in terms of the scrutiny of their candidates, the scrutiny of their policies, what Nigel Farage does. I think it could slip through their fingers if they're not very careful.
Kev, I'd love your take on that, because I put this to Richard the other day. I think they are now a real serious political alternative. I don't want the gimmicks. That's me. But I want to hear. I want as much meat on the bone. People will start to demand that, won't they, Kev?
Well, they will, but I mean, it's such a good job that they weren't more successful at this last election because they weren't ready for it. But in 4 years' time, they will be ready for it. And the fact of the matter is they've got the time to get the right people. They've already got a number of really good people. And by the time they're ready, they will, there's no need to ask the Conservative Party for anything. The Conservatives are finished. They're no longer a Conservative Party.
Well, listen to Adam in Cheshire. He disagrees. He says Reform are going to split the right-leaning vote just as they did in 24. Kemi, this is Adam in Cheshire, replying to you, Kevin, North Yorkshire, as a proper Conservative leader and the change we need. Reform could jeopardise all that. What do you say to that, Kev?
I say that there's absolutely no need for them at all. They are not a Conservative Party. They've proven this over decades now. They've moved more to the middle since Cameron, since just before them. They tried to be Blair back too, and they proved themselves that they've all gone left. They used to be kicked out because they were too arrogant. Then we got the Labour in who trashed the economy, and it was this yo-yoing, as you've mentioned before. They no longer do that. They're as fiscally irresponsible as the Labour Party are. And so there's nowhere else to go, and we need a change. And the only change that's there at the moment that is anything about it is the Reform Party.
Good man, Kevin, North Yorkshire. Thank you. 0344 499 1000. I didn't mean to kill him off that quickly, but I need to get to a voice note. Joe, you're on Talk Drive. Go.
I suspect a lot of the Labour backbenchers are horrified as to what's happening with the Cabinet and the decisions they're making. I think a lot of them would help to put a vote of no confidence in the government alongside every other MP that's in Parliament. That's the only way we're going to get rid of them.
It's very interesting. I mean, there is a point, right? Let's be perfectly honest. 6 months in, however much of a debacle we all see it as, they will think there's still a chance to become a minister and turn this round. But there will come a point where they're not going to become a minister and everything is going south and they think, I want to win my bloody seat.